Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. It's me, Monistic Idealism, here with my friend Kyle, and we're back again for part two with Dr. David Skrbina. Thank you once again for coming on the channel.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be back.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and just jump right into it. And I believe Kyle has the question first.
Yeah, hi everyone. I got a couple questions from our last video relating to the metaphysics of mind. I got a question about we were talking about panpsychism and its the entailments of it if you have a universal subject, and like where we fit in the self, that kind of thing. And I got an anonymous question here. They write, if we start with the panpsychist view, as mentioned in the previous video, that experience is present throughout reality, and that if there's only ultimately one cosmic subject, would it be possible that before our birth and after our death, we either experience what it is like to be the subject, or would it be more like an experiential soup or something like that?
Right. So the questioner is kind of curious about this afterlife condition and maybe even before birth condition, which I guess is probably parallel in some sense. Um, yeah, obviously, so that involves a lot of speculation because we're really sort of on thin ice when we talk about what these possible conditions are like. Um, on a panpsychist view, at least on a strong view, which I've advocated and put forth in writing. Yeah, I mean, there's higher orders of consciousness besides humans. So it goes to higher order systems, social systems, the Earth as a whole system, the solar system, the universe as a whole, right? Even would count as conscious subjects. Now, it's a different matter to say that it really is, everything really is just this higher order cosmic subject. Um, it's like saying, if I got 100 billion neurons in my brain, and each one of those is a little conscious subject or an experiencing subject, which I think it is. I have those 100 billion individual little experiential entities inside my head, and I have this whole unified experience that seems to be me as I talk about it. I don't say, well, it's really me. I don't say, why are those little neural consciousnesses, what are they in terms of really in terms of me, because I'm the real consciousness here. I mean, that's actually probably incorrect to even think about it that way. So I think people who put all the stress on a cosmic consciousness or a higher order, universal level consciousness as some kind of more real are really kind of mistaken in their outlook, first of all. It's consciousness on multiple levels. There's nothing wrong with being consciousness at the organ level, molecular level, atomic level, subatomic, social level, and universal level all at the same time. It's not a question of one is more fundamental or more real than the other. So I guess we need to keep that in mind. Secondly, probably what we think of as our consciousness is probably uniquely connected to our physical manifestation. So, I mean, how we are constructed, the number of neurons in our brain, how they're interconnected, how they exchange energy and matter, through the firings and neurotransmitters and all these nice little things that we understand from brain science. So probably our personality is a function of our unique instantiation as a physical being, which gives us a unique instantiation as a mental being. And what we think of as us, ourselves, or the ego is a relatively stable and persistent pattern of these things, which persists over the life of a human being, right? Through 80 or 90 years of a normal human life. If that matter takes a different form, there's no reason to expect that anything like, my egoistic consciousness will persist in a different form. It's, again, this is a lot of carryover from old Cartesian or even religious kind of thinking about the soul, and the soul is the real me. And, I die, it goes off and emerges with other souls or joins with a cosmic soul or something. I mean, that's just kind of mythological, yeah, kind of nonsense. Philosophically, it's nonsense, I guess. There's really no basis for that. So there's probably no real reason to expect that I, as I constitute myself now, will remember anything, after I'm gone, or can really extract anything meaningful from before I existed. at least kind of that's my view, right? Because I mean, this unique structure that I'm in and that you are in, each person is in, that's sort of a one-shot thing, and that's not going to come around again. Even if all my matter goes somewhere else and dissolves and goes back to the earth and takes a new form of a new kind of being, or grows into a tree or something else, I mean, it's going to be all in a completely different form, and it's not going to be in the same structure that I am currently. So you know, I don't know. I tend to dismiss these kind of ideas about, you know, how I'm going to remember or I can recall from past forms of existence, because, you know, I never existed in this bodily structure, this brain structure. I've never existed this way before I was born. I won't exist after I'm gone. So I don't know. I mean, hopefully that kind of gets to some of the reader's question. You know, I think it's just carryover from traditional talk about a soul that persists after your body's gone, and you know, I just think that's not really a modern philosophical way to think about
Okay, so the second part is just following up on that about not remembering, but you just discussed about that. But I think that the general concern was if experience is there prior and after, and we are that experience, it's not saying the same thing as like physicalism, where it's just oblivion. It's something. It's just very difficult to explain what it is. Um, so it's more or less kind of like the soup, I think they would say in that sense. It'd be kind of like an experiential kind of leaf in the wind, but it's not like
it.
it's not nothing.
Yeah, you know, I guess so. The experientiality will persist, I guess, on a panpsychist view. So you know, it's going to take a different form. It's going to take a different sort of have different qualitative aspects, you know, things that we can't really even imagine. It's sort of like, you know, imagining animal minds or inanimate minds. It's really hard for us to sort of put ourselves in those perspectives. So it's really hard to expand your own conscious outlook to, you know, social systems or planetary systems or cosmic systems. So um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you want to call it a conscious kind of soup, is like some kind of giant, you know, conglomeration of, you know, vast particles and vast mental states. Yeah, you know, okay, maybe there's something like that out there, but again, it's so kind of probably going to be so remote from anything that we can relate to today. It's really hard to say anything, you know, quantitative or substantive about it, I think.
Okay, so yeah, it's experiencing something just really weird, I guess. Yeah. Okay. The next one, that's the big one. It's the combination problem. Do you see it as a nail in the coffin, or is it just merely a problem to be solved with time? Yeah.
Right. So the combination problem is again relating to simpler conscious entities that are a part of a larger conscious entity. So, for example, the billions of neurons in my brain. If those are individuals, presumably simple conscious entities or simple experiential entities, and then somehow, since those neurons compose my brain, which is a key element of my own consciousness, my own higher order consciousness, right? How do those many billions of simpler consciousnesses relate to or compose my larger mind? And again, it's certainly not a nail in the coffin. It's far from that. You know, it's an interesting question. You know, I've talked about it as a kind of a call for details, as sort of something to be elaborated and explained and kind of you know, fleshed out in terms of theories, general theories of consciousness and you know, relationship of consciousness to physical structure and so forth. To me, you know, I've thought about it in terms of interacting elements. So, you know, the neurons in my brain seem to be key elements of my personal consciousness, and each one sort of contributes its own little you know, aspect or dimension, if you will, to my larger consciousness. And the way I've thought about it is in terms of traditional state space models or phase space models. It's a mathematical approach. That looks at complex dynamic systems in terms of the different possible states that they can be in. And in this case, if you want to say, well, look, my brain state is a function of, at the highest level, these 100 billion or whatever it is neurons, and each neuron can be yeah, an anomaly in a couple of states, right? It's basically on or off. It's basically firing or not firing. But yeah, I think there's some intermediate levels in between. So basically, on a phase space model, you would say, well, look, each contributing element, let's say each neuron, creates one dimension in the larger space of the system. So if the system is my brain as a whole, every neuron is one little dimension. So we can do a little model of two-dimensional graph. We can model three-dimensional graph, but we have a hard time drawing pictures and picturing things of 4 or 5 dimensions, just because we can't. I mean, that's not our space that we work in. So now imagine a 100 billion dimensional space. And mathematically, we can do it easily. It's no problem. It's just lots of numbers, lots of digits. It's hard to picture in your head, but that's okay. We can deal with it abstractly. And so I've argued that really the brain operates in a 100 billion dimensional space, where all those neurons are doing their individual things, firing or not firing, or their intermediate states. And then the brain itself is an instantaneous composite system of all of those individual neural states. So the neurons are doing their own simple little things, and maybe they have little simple experiential states. There's probably one where they're excited when they're firing, and maybe it's sort of like sleeping when they're not firing. I don't know. We're just sort of speculating here, but something, very kind of a quiescent state when they're not firing, and they're very active and energetic when they're firing, and then they go back. You can imagine that's sort of the mental life of a neuron. It's a pretty simple little kind of, being awake and then going back to sleep, and then being excited and then going back to sleep, right? Okay, that's certainly feasible. But that little activity, when you make that 100 billion dimensions of complexity, that opens up a vast space of which my brain, for example, can move in all kinds of directions. It can take in, visual signals through my eyes and auditory through my ears and tactile feelings, and it puts all those neurons in different states. And my brain's humming around, says it's seeing something, and it's seeing bright things and dark things, and I'm getting thirsty and I'm feeling a pain in my leg, and all these little things are going on. And because all those different neurons are firing and doing their thing, it creates very complex mental states for the whole. So to me, that's the way I'm not sure if that's correct, but I like that approach, and I think that's a good way to think about the combination problem. It's not really solving it in a sense, but it's explaining it. It says, look, I have these individual simple consciousnesses in my brain. They're doing simple little things, but because I have billions of them, I have a very complex higher order system. Right? It's not like I have 100 billion complex little talking neurons who are wondering and thinking and philosophizing. And no, they're just like, sleeping and awake and sleeping and awake. But when I got billions of them and they're all talking together, wow, I get a pretty complex higher order system. So to me, that's, that kind of approach is the best way to think about it. It fleshes it out. It explains how it works. In a sense, the kind of a solution or a resolution to the combination problem.
Okay.
And it provides, I think, what we need. It's certainly not some major haymaker problem. It's going to bring down a panpsychist approach. It just requires a sort of an explanation of how that might work.
Excellent. I really like how you phrase it about how it's more like a call for attention to detail, because I think, sometimes we're quick to compare it to like physicalism or dualism, which, all these views have been on for a long time, but those other two options have gotten a bit more mainstream attention for a much longer period of time. And so we have more of a pressure on those views to like, hey, why haven't you answered this yet? But panpsychism is in many ways fresh. And I think it needs some more time and attention before we can really start, interrogating it too much and saying, well, hey, you can't answer this right now, so something's wrong with you. It's like, no, I think we need to give it more time. I don't think it's gotten as much attention and resources poured into it as materialism and dualism. So I think we need to be a bit more patient.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, obviously it's a very old theory, right? As I explained in my book, it goes back, a couple of thousand years at least. But it has not had the systematic, philosophical, and rational treatment like other theories of mind and brain have in recent decades. So you're right. I mean, in that sense, it's been a much less focus in terms of the work, and so there's the need to flesh these things out. So I mean, other philosophers have done. Other panpsychist philosophers have kind of offered up different solutions. So I think it's something that we can make progress on, and certainly not an insurmountable problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess you may have already partially answered this earlier, but I guess what are some promising solutions or avenues to explore with regards to the combination problem? And is it possible to apply a similar strategy towards mental decombination?
Yeah, decombination. So that refers back to a cosmopsychist view, right? Where you have a sort
Right.
of universal conscious, which maybe somehow breaks down into smaller consciousnesses. I think it's basically the same kind of picture that I was describing, right? It's not like we're a little slice of this big, giant universal mind or something. I mean, it's just that we're a simpler element of which there are, countless billions or trillions of different complex little elements in the universe, and we're all sort of contributing our silly little bits of excitement that we do. And at a cosmic level, it's probably ridiculously simple, just like a neuron is either, buzzing or he's sleeping. Okay, it's a pretty simple kind of mental life, and I'm sure we're equally simple in terms of some cosmic consciousness. But it's the little neural consciousness is doing its thing, our brain is doing its thing, our social mind is doing its thing, and then goes to the higher orders go up. They just run in parallel. They're parallel, higher order, higher dimensionality minds. I think is probably the best way to think about that, right? So it's not that we have to break down come up with the theory of decomposing or deconstructing this large cosmic mind. I mean, I think it's a matter of thinking about it in terms of these kind of comparable models. To me, this dimensionality approach, a state space kind of approach, I think is a really sort of a fruitful way to think about it. Maybe one other way that I've sort of been experimenting in recent years is with sort of field theoretic approaches. So we know, for example, in physics, fields are considered fundamental. I mean, there's some nice statements by Einstein and some others that said everything is really just fields. I mean, it looks like matter, looks like stuff, but it's really just fields in different sort of states. And fields are really nifty because they combine and decombine in very sort of elegant and automatic, natural, I should say, very natural kind of ways. I mean, fields can add and subtract, and the waves can interfere and so forth. I mean, it's a very natural sort of approach to think about fields combining to create higher order fields or compound fields and so forth. So I don't have a lot of details to offer there, but just that in recent years, that struck me as kind of another fruitful approach, in addition to a state space or phase space approach, is a sort of a field theoretic approach to mind, which again lends itself very naturally to to dealing with a combination problem type of question, right?
Good. I hope panpsychists can explore that avenue then. That sounds interesting indeed. Okay, this one's definitely a bit more topical. So recently, integrated information theory was labeled as pseudoscience by 124 authors, and a lot of panpsychists have an interest in integrated information theory. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on it being labeled pseudoscience?
So yeah, I don't know how many of your viewers are familiar with integrated information theory, IIT. So that basically comes from Giulio Tononi. It's been around, I think, for about 20 years, as far as I know, or 2003, 2004. I think he sort of constructed the basic form of that view. I mean, it's an interesting theory. It's a very formalized mathematical theory. It's quite technical. It's quite complicated. I'm sure I don't even really understand all the aspects of it, uh, from what I know about it, I like the theory. I'm impressed with what it can do. I mean, I like Tononi. He's an impressive guy. I've met him personally, I think, on 3 different occasions. We've had chances to talk. Um, and I know he's been very supportive of panpsychist views for his own theory. He's been criticized because of the panpsychist implications. But I think we can undermine a lot of those criticisms. They're just Most of the criticisms are just superficial. They're either just ignorant or they just they don't really even understand what panpsychism is. So that's hardly a critique. In fact, that's to the credit of IIT that it's actually open to panpsychist interpretation. That's to its credit, and that goes a long way to at least telling me that he's on the right track with that sort of approach. Um, it's there's different. I think there's different forms of IIT. Again, I'm not a sort of an expert in it. There's strong forms and there's weaker forms. I think Giulio himself holds to a stronger kind of form where pretty much all properly integrated information has a kind of a conscious state, and there's a question of how pervasive that is, because information is arguably ubiquitous in nature. And is the integration also ubiquitous in nature? So this is sort of the question, right? In what forms or what kind of manifestations does it take to actually integrate the information, which is probably ubiquitous, in the right way, and to realize a sort of a conscious state. So I think he's on the, I like what he's saying. I think he's generally on the right track. I've been supportive of his outlook. I mean, the scientist guys, though, they don't like this sort of stuff. I mean, they don't, they tend to be brain theoreticians, and they talk about consciousness, but they don't, I'm not sure they really deal with consciousness per se. They don't really like the philosophical questions. They certainly don't like metaphysics. They don't like to talk about qualia or qualitative aspects of consciousness, because that's purely subjective, and they have extremely hard times dealing with that. They can't measure it. They can't quantify it. So any theory of consciousness is potentially unscientific, in the sense that it's not is not amenable to objective testing, to falsifiability, and these other criteria that they want for a, quote, scientific theory of consciousness. So I mean, arguably that's even a kind of an oxymoron. There's a reason to think that science simply cannot grasp the intrinsic nature of consciousness, so it's bound to fail. All it can deal is with certain manifestations or consequences of consciousness, but not the consciousness itself. I mean, they have a hard time dealing with the whole problem of other minds, right? I mean, scientific theories of consciousness, when you talk about animal minds, for example, which theoretically should be the easiest things to deal with, certainly for higher order animals. But we have very hard times talking about consciousness and other animals besides ourselves. We can't verify it. We can't have a hard time quantifying it. We can't make objective tests and so forth. So, I think really what the demand for being strictly scientific, being strictly testable, is an unreasonable demand. It's understandable, because that's all that science does. It does testable, objective verification of different criteria, and that's really all it can do, and that's its limitations. I mean, that's its strength on the one hand, and that's its limitation. It can't deal with other issues of subjectivity or metaphysics. So I think that really just shows that science hits its boundaries in certain aspects of consciousness, and it's just not capable of analyzing. So if science tells me some theory of consciousness is unscientific, I just say, well, look, that theory exceeded the bounds of what science can say, and that's too bad for science. I mean, now we're in the realm of philosophy or metaphysics, and science did as far as it did. It did it best it's good. It tried its best, and it couldn't encompass the whole of the theory. And I suspect that's true with IIT. You can't really encompass the whole of the theory. So it says, well, this is just some kind of, pseudoscientific, non-verifiable, non-testable sort of thing, and then they throw their little nasty comments at it. But that's just, to me, that shows the limitations of the science, not the limitations of the theory. So,
yeah, I'm inclined to agree. 3 of the people who signed were Daniel Dennett, Patricia Churchland, and Keith Frankish. And these are, eliminativists, people who I think kind of take science a little too far. It's like a kind of scientism. So I'm inclined to, agree with you. I think it's a very similar attitude there. So the next question would be, what do you define idealism as? What would be your definition of idealism?
Right. So idealism is typically a form of monism, right? Where the one substance of reality is not physical stuff, it's mental stuff. So it's either ideas or minds, or they used to talk about spirits and souls, or those kind of things. Some mental reality is the one and only ultimate reality. And then what appears to be non-mental is a manifestation of some underlying mental reality. So to me, I think that's kind of the standard philosophical dimension of definition, of idealism, right? It says mind or consciousness or or spirit of some kind is the one ultimately real substance. It's a form of monism, that mind is the one ultimate reality. It has some interesting predecessors back in the ancient Greeks. Berkeley, in the 1700s, promoted idealism in kind of an interesting and famous way, and made a lot of headway because he kind of showed it has actually very strong arguments in its favor. It's actually very hard to refute, and so it has an interesting sort of history. Today, I would say not many philosophers consider themselves to be idealists. It probably is quite a minority view, although, me personally, I'm open to it. I don't call myself an idealist, but I understand there's a lot of strengths to it. I know Galen Strawson, who I've been in contact off and on over the years. I think he's, pretty much seems to be on the idealist sort of bandwagon these days, unless he's changed recently. And he's got a pretty good argument, right? He says, well, look, there's you can conceive of a reality either as experiential reality or as non-experiential reality. And he says, all we know of is the experiential kind. And we like to speculate about the non-experiential kind, but we have no good reason to think that it's real. We have no evidence for it. And it's really nothing to be said in its favor. So all that we can really know and all that seems to be rationally justifiable is the experiential reality, which is the experiencing reality that experiences. And so all this talk about the so-called physical or objective or non-experiential, non-mental parts of reality are just sort of extrapolations from an experiencing perspective. So yeah, there's some really kind of interesting arguments in favor of a kind of idealism. I'm sympathetic. Like I say, I don't consider myself one, but there's some good arguments for it.
Definitely. And so this next question is one I've been thinking about a bit as well. So I guess it can depend on what's meant by physical, but if physics describes just the structure and dynamics, and if we take the physical to be exhausted by what physics describes, if that's what it is, I guess, and the mental, what you call this experiential reality, if that's the intrinsic nature of the physical, I guess that's what it is ultimately, then is this really a dual aspect monism? Because if the physical is just what the mental does, and the mental is intrinsic, this is what it is, doesn't that mean that there's really just the mental, and the physical is really just the behavior of the mental?
Yeah, I think as described, you're right. That would be a form of idealism if the experiential is the sort of the ultimate underlying reality. Now that's not what I would view as a sort of a kind of a dual aspect monism, because I've argued for dual aspect monism. I consider that's sort of my favorite view. So I call myself a dual aspect philosopher. But yeah, so I think on a more standard dual aspect view, you kind of have this sort of two sides of the coin story, right? And this is kind of how I've typically described it. It's kind of like, you look at it one side, you sort of see the physical side or the one side of the coin, and you flip it around and you see the other side, and each side looks complete and looks whole. You can see the mental side from this way, you look and see the physical side from this way. Each side looks complete. There's a complete story. There's a causal closure of both sides because they're complete when you look at one side of the coin or the other. But you don't say, well, look, the one side, you don't say the head side of my coin is more fundamental than the tail side. You don't say the wave interpretation of physics is the real version and the particle, interpretation is sort of derivative or something. No, you've got both, right? You have both. They're both sitting sort of side by side in parallel. And you look at it one side and you see wave physics. You look at the other side, you see particle physics, right? If you look at the universe on one side, from a sort of an externalist viewpoint, you see physical reality, and it's described in physical ways, and you've got physical causal closure and so forth. And you look at sort of on the other side, on the inside, if you will, you see experiential reality and arguably only experiential reality. And okay, so it's sort of one thing, like you got the one coin and it's got the two sides, and we can talk about it both ways. science and physics likes only the physical side. They don't even know there's the back side of the coin. They didn't want to talk about it because they got their one side and they're happy with that one. But of course, you always got the other side, and a truly complete picture of reality, if it's sort of a dual aspect kind of metaphysics, it's got the two sides, right? So if you really want a complete picture of reality, you have to give your complete analysis or description, if you will, of both sides. You've got to deal with the physical side, and you've got to deal with the other side, the mental side, the experiential side, and you sort of have to show how those guys line up. To me, there's kind of this point by point lining up of the physical side and the mental side, and these guys sort of exist on a one-to-one correspondence. And to me, that's sort of the obvious way that it makes the most sense. And therefore, you can see a kind of direct correlation between the mental aspect and the physical aspect. But you have both. It's a dual aspect system. It's a monist system because you have one system, one reality. It just happens to have those two aspects. We don't know why. Maybe God made it that way. We don't know. But it seems to have those two aspects, and it would be sort of misleading to call one or the other as more fundamental or as more intrinsic or whatever. By the nature of a dual aspect view, you don't have a priority to either side. You've got to treat them both equally, sort of in this equal metaphysical status, and then deal with them that way.
Okay, yeah, I'm reminded of this. I can't remember if it was Leibniz or Spinoza, but he said something like, no matter how thin you slice something, there's still two sides. Doesn't matter how thin you slice it. So, okay, so we'll go to the next question here. So,
Yeah,
what are
sure.
your thoughts on a local realism being false?
Local realism. I guess you'll have to define that one.
Oh, okay, Kyle, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so last year, the 2022 Nobel Prize was given out for local realism being false, about non-locality and or realism, etc. So if an object's not perceived, it's the old quantum issue that pops up, right? If I'm not looking at it, does it enter into existence? Or is it that if I look at the star 100 light years away, it instantly changes, but that's not like our old conception. So either locality or realism is wrong, or they're both wrong, but they can't both be true. So I just want to see what that happens to be for panpsychism, if it changes anything for you, or what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, sort of the non-locality, I always think in terms of quantum entanglement, right? Of particles that have been interacting and then are removed, and still sort of instantaneously linked somehow, even at vast distances, right? So I think we've proven that at a quantum level. The question is, what does that mean at a macro level, macro scale? I think that can be tied in with sort of, Copenhagen interpretation of physics, where sort of the observation and the mind affects the state. So if the mind affects the state of one system or particle that's quantum entangled at a distance, does it instantaneously change that other particle at a vast distance, right? So you get these kind of really interesting sort of, bizarre scenarios like that, right? So by observing a distant star, when it reaches my consciousness, am I somehow changing its quantum state or something? Yeah. I don't know. I guess I don't know. I don't know if I have anything really of value to add to that. I know people like John Wheeler have talked about this, and he seemed at the very end of his life to move in a panpsychist direction, because he talked about this sort of participatory mind thing, where the mind is an active thing, where the mind perceives things and actually changes things by perceiving them. And Wheeler was in favor of that, and he kind of realized, he said, well, there's lots of minds out there in the universe. If every mind is not just some scientist's mind who can change the quantum state of anything, he says, well, look, all these particles out there, or whatever, other observers, other things. He says there's potentially an unlimited number of observers who are changing states of matter out there. So if you really kind of, open up to a panpsychist view, where any psyche, any little experiential entity is capable of interacting in this Copenhagen way, where it's actually changing quantum states or physical states at some level. that really opens up a vast can of worms, right? Because you're talking about everything in the universe able to sort of simultaneously interact and change everything else in the universe at an infinite scale of distance in both space and time. And then it's like this is sort of really kind of mind-blowing sort of stuff, right? Now you need a bottle of vodka and something else to kind of start to get your head around this sort of what this actually means, because it's really sort of so bizarre at that point. I mean, I've argued really for something along those lines, right? If you really take a strong panpsychist vision, you're really saying, look, the universe is a vast entanglement of minds, because the highest orders of mind, the intermediate levels, the galaxies and the solar systems and the stars themselves, these are all experiencing entities, down to this atoms and subatomic particles. So you get this vast hierarchy of minds experiencing other minds. And it's really kind of like I say, sort of a mind-blowing kind of picture. But I mean, it sort of logically follows from a lot of these different views. There's nothing obviously wrong with it. It's just sort of really fascinating and compelling. Probably could be some great science fiction movies made out of this kind of stuff, or maybe some video games. I don't know. So I'm certainly open to all those things. I get a little bit worried when we start bringing in quantum entanglement and non-locality, because that's like so sort of bizarre and nobody really understands that kind of stuff. And the math gets so complicated. People start throwing out, quantum wave equations. I'm like, what the hell is this, right? Because nobody can really follow that except, maybe a handful of people in the world, and they don't really even know what it means. So I get a little worried when people start whipping out, quantum theories and start to apply it to panpsychism. But I mean, in principle, I mean, I'm open to those things, and I think we should be aware that those are valid and live possibilities, right?
No, yeah, no, I tend to feel the same way. Yeah, I don't really go too far down the quantum avenue in general, but I know that Kyle has another question here for you.
Yeah, so this will be the last one for our philosophy of mind section here. It's just it's for the eliminativists and illusionists. There's a couple that do follow the channel, and they feel that illusionism or liminativism, etc., is strawmanned a lot. So they brought up something in Daniel Dennett's Consciousness Explained, and some of them are called his traps. And that if we fall into one of these traps, well, of course, we'll think consciousness is real or efficacious, etc. So one of them, it's called the fire demon. It's someone had a good thought experiment about this one, and ultimately, what it says is that, let's say you have a caveman 3,000 years ago. He's around a bunch of wood, and a lightning strike hits the fire. That's right, it hits the wood, and then a fire starts. He'll say, wow, this is interesting. What's happening here? There must be some kind of fire demon eating the wood, and then something's happening, and there's fire in exchange. Then something happens, a big flood occurs, and he's frozen. And then 3,000 years later, scientists unfreezes him, and they talk about fire, etc. And the scientist says, well, there is no fire demon. It's just a chemical reaction between X, Y, and Z. And the caveman will probably think, well, it's probably better for me not to extrapolate and say, well, there's this ghostly thing like a fire demon, it's just chemical reaction. And that's kind of the same with our mind. We think it's like that, and hence it follows that this is kind of like the folk psychology eliminists will use and say this is not a real thing. But that's my my take, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, so Dennett and some others have, Churchland has been sort of prominent, right, in sort of this eliminativist view. I mean, it's really taking scientific materialism, physicalism, to its sort of extreme limit, because physical realm is apparently complete and causally closed, and there seems to be no need to introduce mental entities, mental agency, for example, in the laws of physics. It doesn't seem to play a role. I mean, certainly consciousness, because it's a very arguably purely subjective thing, doesn't seem to fit in with the physicalist worldview. can't be explained in terms of standard physical terms, doesn't seem to be necessary. And so, Churchland and Dennett others throw out this idea that, well, it's just sort of kind of an illusion or something that's not really real. We don't really need it. We sort of can grow beyond this now. Like we used to talk about souls and God and whatever else. We think, yeah, we don't really need that anymore. We can just kind of talk about the brain and the functioning and the scientific rules and mathematical principles. And we just kind of don't really need to talk about that mind stuff anymore. That's sort of an old folk notion, as they would say. And it's not something that's really even real. So yeah, you can sort of argue your way right out of existence, right? The idea that you don't really have any consciousness or mind, and I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting theoretical position. I'm not sure Churchland ever really held that view himself. I'm not sure Dennett maybe even really does himself. I know he's been criticized. Strawson and others have really attacked him for this view and said, there's nothing stupider than ruling out of existence the one thing that that's more real than anything else in this universe, which is your own physical, your own mental awareness, your own mind, your own consciousness, which is the one and only indubitable fact that you have. I mean, it goes back to Descartes, right? So to rule that out of existence is mind-bogglingly stupid. And Strawson had some funny words about how colossally stupid you can be in scientific rationalism, that you rationally exclude your own existence. You write yourself like Alice in Wonderland or something. You're writing yourself right out of the story. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's any I don't know. I don't know. There's any people really take that too seriously. It's kind of one of those interesting sort of positions, but again, it does, on the face of it, it's a stupid position to even sort of to take. I mean, it does beg an explanation, and that's why I like dual aspect kind of views, because look, I can account for the fact that science has an apparently complete view of things, but it's only looking at one side of the thing, the reality, and there's this whole other side, and I can describe that completely in mental or experiential terms. So I like it because it's like any good philosophical problem. It pushes us to think a little more clearly about things. So I mean, I like it. It's the counterpart to idealism, right? We can argue for pure idealism. It's really kind of got some interesting, good arguments, but I don't think it's really true. But it makes us think harder about things. And in the counterpart, the purely physicalist, the eliminativist physicalist view, which write your own mind out of existence. Oh, okay, that's kind of interesting and clever. That's probably not true, but it makes us think a little bit better about our theories and say, why is that even possible, right? Why is it even possible to construct clever arguments and philosophical traps like Dennett has that are plausible? I mean, they're plausible. A guy's not stupid. He knows how to construct an interesting philosophical argument. But it kind of begs, like, well, why does that even work? Why is there even any valid argument there? Because it's probably telling us something important, and it's pointing us in a certain direction. So yeah, that would be my contribution to that particular issue.
Excellent. I like it. Do you have any comments on that before we go to the politics section, Kyle?
No, I just wanted to say that, yeah, so from what I heard, you're obviously not on the idea where it's like the fire, it's just the chemicals, whatever it is. You definitely are on saying that the mental awareness stuff is literally right at the ground level. It's not somehow bubbling up. It's not like an emergent thing. It's there at the bottom, and it's right in parallel. So yeah. Okay, cool, thanks.
Excellent. Okay, so here's where I get into a little bit more of politics. I asked about this a little bit, but we didn't get into too much detail because we just ran out of time. So earlier I asked about Israel and boycotting Israel. And I was going to ask, why do you think people should boycott Israel?
Yeah, so that's a big change from the philosophy of mind.
Right.
But that's okay, because that's we try to be sort of well-rounded philosophers. We don't want to be pigeonholed here and just talking about the simple things. That we'd like to deal with the real world. I for many years at University of Michigan, I was teaching ethics, and to me, it's like a serious thing. I mean, talk about ethics and social and political philosophy, which I talked about, as well as philosophy of mind and philosophy of technology. So I think, as a philosopher, and I'm sure all of us are philosophers here at some level,
Right.
we sort of have an obligation to deal with all these questions, right? Metaphysical questions, and ethical questions, right? I mean, that's kind of all part of the whole story of philosophy. So yeah, I mean, I was teaching back 20 years ago now, starting in Michigan, teaching ethics and social political philosophy issues, and coming across issues. I happen to have a lot of Arab and Muslim students at my campus, and they were very active in the divestment movement. And I started talking to them about it, and I knew, because I knew a little bit about it, didn't know a lot, but it was kind of interesting to hear from them how they were doing it. They were personally affected. We had people with students that had families in Lebanon and Palestine, and they were directly affected by Israeli actions, and they were describing what's going on and how the media doesn't really give you the whole story. In fact, media gives you a highly distorted picture of what's going on, and there's reasons for that. So you kind of led to some really interesting sort of discussions, and I was like fully on board. I mean, I'm generally kind of a pro-human rights kind of guy, and I'm like, yeah, there's clearly an injustice being done by the Israelis against Palestinians. In fact, it's like a no-brainer. I mean, it's not really even close when you look at the facts of what's going on, going back to the Balfour Declaration in 1917 or whatever. So I was immediately on board with the divestment movement on our campus. There was a number of active people, a number of active faculty there. The students were active at their level, but the faculty were less active at my campus. Probably on most campuses, a lot of faculty are a little bit, let's say, intimidated by dealing with political issues like that, particularly Arab-Israeli question. But I felt I had to have an obligation. Lecturing about ethics, I claim to be some kind of expert in ethics, and I can't really ignore a gross ethical injustice without speaking out about it. So I sort of led the charge on my campus to get some documents written, a little petition signed from the faculty side. I worked with one or two other faculty members. We drew up a little statement. We went around and got it, we're collecting signatures, going to other faculty. I went to all the other philosophy faculty in my little department. We have a small department on my campus. I ended up getting everybody, I think, but one signed on to this little statement, which was basically a call to explore divestment, right? So I suppose it works differently at different universities. At the University of Michigan, when you encounter an issue that's potentially appropriate, the first move, you don't just leap right to divestment, which is selling or the stocks or the bonds of the entity in question. You have to form a committee to study the question, to decide what's going to happen. And that's the first step. And so what I was arguing at my campus was, well, look, this is clearly an ethical violation. It's, crimes against humanity and clearly an apartheid situation in Palestine. And it clearly meets the bar to form a committee to make a recommendation about divestment. I mean, that's the very first baby step in the process, right? Just to make the case that a committee should be formed to look at the matter and make a recommendation. That was it. I mean, to me, that was such a simple baby step that anybody with a shred of, ethical sensitivity would say, sign on an instant. Yes, of course it's worth studying. Yes, we need to form a committee. But it was like pulling teeth to get faculty to sign on to that really simple statement. And yeah, I don't know. That was kind of a whole eye-opening story there in itself. I'd probably take a whole hour show, and I would have to explain to you all the difficulties that I ran into.
I bet.
Just trying to get faculty and staff members, administrators, who were even less reluctant, or more reluctant, less willing to sign on to these kind of statements, which seem like ethically so simple, but it was so difficult to get progress, get movement on. And I spent a lot of years, basically my whole time there working off and on, promoting petition statements, trying to get recognition that this baby step should happen of forming a committee to make a recommendation. And yeah, massive resistance within my university as within most universities. So yeah, still needs to be done. Obviously, even more so today. We were talking about before the show, right? Yesterday, they launched this latest war, right? So Hamas was fed up after 70 years of abuse and humiliation. They decided they're going to fight back, and now we've got a full-blown war going on. And we've had the typical cowardly, spineless, we're on Israel's side thing. Doesn't matter how criminal they are. or how guilty they are, and uh, the appropriate action is to go full-blown sanctions, full-blown BDS right now, because they're actively killing people, obviously in response to the attack yesterday. So yeah, current news. We need it more than ever. Like I said, we needed it 20 years ago when I was talking about it, and we need it even more today.
Right on. I'm inclined to agree with you. At the time of this recording, yeah, it's October 8th. And so yeah, just like you said, there was the attack that happened. But overall, I agree with what you said, actually. I hold a similar stance as you, really. I think it's a clear ethical violation what's happening to the Palestinians. And um, it's unfortunate how the media just will use charges of anti-Semitism and stuff like that to silence genuine criticism. And this is what happens to dissidents. I think this happens in philosophy of mind as well. If you're a dissident from the mainstream, you're just sort of shunned, you're silenced, you're smeared. And the same goes for politics. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that metaphysical dissidents like you and I also are these political dissidents as well. So when
Yeah,
it comes,
it's even
oh, go
worse.
ahead.
It's worse in the political realm because there's big money behind it, right? I mean, there's a lot of high money, high wealth individuals and institutions that are entrenched in back of Israeli interests. So I don't think they're there in philosophy of mind, but they're certainly there on the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Yeah, certainly
So
not on the
yes,
same level. Yeah,
yeah,
certainly.
yeah, exactly. So that's really, I mean, that's the test of an ethical position, right? You don't just buckle under because you run into resistance. And unfortunately, we've got a lot of people, at least in my experience in the academic world, who they just immediately buckle under. They get any kind of resistance because of the financial forces behind that, and they just collapse. They just refuse to take a stance because it's going to cause them some personal inconvenience. And to me, that's kind of the height of immorality, frankly. I mean, you got to take a basic ethical stance and be willing to stand up for it and speak on behalf of what's right action, right? There's a basic ethical position, and to me, it shouldn't take a lot of moral courage to do that, but apparently it does, at least in the academic world.
Indeed, you're absolutely right. In the interest of time, like you said, we can go on this for like hours, but in interest of time, I'll go to this next question here. Do you believe that there's a one or two state solution to this issue, or do you think maybe there's a no state solution? What do you think we should do?
Yeah, probably there should be no. I mean, the Israeli state is a racist state. It's defined as a Jewish-only state. Probably should not exist, right? Unless we're going to open up the realm to having a world full of ethno states, which is generally considered taboo. But we have one exception. We make that exception for the Jews, for Israel. But unless we're willing to make that a global exception, and we seem to not be willing to do that, then they should not exist. So there really should be no Israel. There should be just a state of the people who live there. I guess the Jews are going to live there as well as the Palestinians. But if the Palestinians are in the majority, then they're going to be the majority influence in that government, and there probably should be one state. It should be a Palestinian dominant state, and then the Jews will have to, live with their minority status. That's really as far as I can see, the only rational solution as things stand today.
Okay, thank you for giving your thoughts on this important topic. This is also somewhat related to politics, somewhat. I guess a little bit. So Ted Kaczynski, was philosophy of mind important to his philosophy, like in general for his eco philosophy? And was he a panpsychist like you? Did you both share similar philosophy of mind takes?
Right. Well, right. So Ted Kaczynski was a Unabomber. He and I exchanged many letters, a couple hundred letters over several years, mostly back in the 2010s. Ted died, of course, a few months ago. But he and I we talked about several topics related to in our letters in the philosophy of technology, mostly what technology is, how to resist it, what's it doing, how can we best undermine it, or whatever, revolt in his terms against the technological system. he knew I was a philosopher. He was a mathematician, was his formal field. I have a mathematical background prior to philosophy, so we could relate in that sense. But to me, it was like the philosophy was important to understanding technology, and I, um, a couple of times in my letters, I would sort of try to push forward some sort of philosophical ideas about technology and what it was, and talk about Heidegger or Ellul, some of these more important figures in the technology. I I know we really didn't talk about philosophy of mind. I don't think we really touched on panpsychism. But anytime I would veer into sort of philosophical or metaphysical issues, he would just kind of wave it off, and he didn't really want to talk about this. Like, he's a pragmatic guy. He's a nuts and bolts guy, right? We got a concrete problem. We got a technological system. It's crushing the humanity. It's crushing nature, and we need to stop this thing. And that's all we need to talk about. It. Philosophy is just sort of like, he might call it surrogate activity, or just like inconsequential, just sort of, armchair theorizing, which doesn't really do anything to attack the technological system. So anytime I brought up these sort of philosophical issues, Ted just kind of dismissed them, didn't want to talk about it. So I like, well, okay, I got other venues to talk about the philosophy of technology, which I did. But he and I just kept a very concrete sort of issues. So to me, from everything I could see, he was not philosophically oriented. He was not interested in philosophy of mind, wasn't even really interested in philosophy of technology. He was just a very concrete, action-oriented pragmatist, if I could classify him that way. And he was a single-minded focus on, undermining technological system.
Very interesting. Okay, thanks for sharing that. How
Sure.
does panpsychism play into your eco philosophy, if at all?
Well, I think it does. It's kind of interesting. So a lot of this is spelled out in my book, The Metaphysics of Technology, published by Routledge in 2015. So I think it's probably my major work. I would definitely recommend it for any of your viewers, your listeners who might want to check this book out. Yeah, because when you look at really what technology is, the word technology is a composite of techne and logos, right? It's an ancient Greek idea, and it's really kind of the manifestation of making something real, creating something. Techne is art or construction, making something, right? Techne. And anything that's made requires a logos, which is a kind of a thought process or a logic that's driving the creation of the thing that becomes real, that appears. And this is obvious in the case of human activity, right? So like you're making a sculpture, if you're a sculptor and you want to make a statue, the sculptor has an image in his mind of what he wants, and he gets a piece of marble and he goes ting, 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 and he turns his picture in his mind into a physical thing. And then there you have the physical statue. So it's clear and obvious how it works in the human realm. But the Greeks understood that, well, look, nature does that all the time. Nature makes things. Things appear that did not appear before. They even knew that, or they had at least an intuition that things like stars and planets, they didn't really know what they were, but they're like, hey, these things probably didn't exist, and then they came into existence, and something made them. There's some kind of logic or thought process in the universe that's realizing these physical things. That's what happens, right? Physical techne and logos are linked together. There's very fundamental factors that work in the universe. It's not just that it happens in humans and not just in animals. It's sort of ubiquitous throughout nature. These things come into being, which is a mental type process, a logos process. And so if you think about it that way, it both explains technology, and it's very panpsychist, because it says, well, look, there's a universal logos process at work, which goes on in people, goes on in animals, goes on in plants, it goes on in nature, it goes on in space. I mean, it's this creation of things that come into being that did not exist before. That's a manifestation or a realization or a reification of a logos process. So to me, that's like a law of nature. Maybe that's the fundamental law of nature, is this techne logos process that works throughout the world, not just in technology, but throughout the whole universe. And this is sort of what the Greek view was. And I think they were on the right track. They didn't have the details or the sort of obviously the elaborations that we kind of do now, 2,000 years, 2,500 years later. but I think they're on the right track. So I think there's a definite panpsychist angle to it. I write about it in my book. It's in the Metaphysics of Technology. I describe the importance of the panpsychist view as a aspect of this techne logos process, which is universal in nature, and it links every form of construction of reality, from subatomic particles or whatever emerged right after the Big Bang, right up through the most modern high-tech microprocessor. There's really a continuous process of creation and complexity that's going on, which is a realization of a kind of a logos process. To me, it's like increasing order. This is really how I've described it. It's sort of this manifestation of order in the universe, or complexity in the universe, which is being realized because there's an abundance of superabundance, actually, of energy available in the universe, because the universe is expanding and it functions like a heat engine. And this excess energy in the face of this excess matter creates ever more complex forms. So it starts with subatomic particles, then it moves on to stars, then stars become planets, planets become simple life forms, and living things, and then complex living things, and complex technological things. And these are sort of ever more energy dense systems that are being realized as the universe is marching towards ever more complex systems. It's marching towards order. I call it being biased towards order. So the kind of teleological thrust to the universe, and it's moving towards more complex systems. And so, to me, that's the story that links technology, evolution, panpsychism. Kind of, it's like a coherent sort of theory of reality. At least I hope it is. That was sort of my goal in my book. So,
Okay. And I know we're running a little bit short on time. So there were some other questions I had about eco-philosophy, but before I
sure.
get to there, I think Kyle had a quick question. I think it was about the multiverse, I believe.
Oh yeah, we mentioned cosmology for like 2 seconds there, but um, are you in like? There's generally three thoughts right now about how the universe came into be, etc. It's like there's intent, or it just is what it is, or it's like a multiverse. Those are usually the three philosophical things that are coming up lately. Um, Multiverse is an interesting one. There's a lot. It's really divided. If you even read like people like George Ellis, super against it, but then you have other guys like Roger Penrose who have this cyclical one, which is another view. And then there's other ones like you have Aerobic, where everything can happen, but there's tons of pushback on that because, well, then everything is, kind of happening. It's kind of like a fantasy in a sense, but I don't know. Where do you take that? And then I just have a quick follow up, and then yeah.
Yeah, I'm sort of vaguely aware about those theories. Again, that's sort of so highly speculative. To me, it's sort of in that same camp with the quantum theory stuff, right? Because it's so sort of weird and bizarre that you can sort of spin out almost any version of the theory that you want. That there's one universe, or there's multiple, or there's infinitely many universes, or there are infinitely many branching points at every instance. So there's these countless infinity of universes, and every possible course of action is taken in one of those. And then you sort of have to say, well, is there any interaction between those infinitely branching universes, and why are we stuck in this one, which seems to work in just a certain way that it does, and why don't we really sense these infinitely branching possibilities? And yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just sort of one that you can really spin yourself around into a circle and just screw yourself into the ground without really getting anywhere, because it's again, it's like the quantum stuff. It's so esoteric. And I don't think people really even understand it that well, that we're sort of, throw all these sort of bizarre possibilities. So I don't know. To me, it's intriguing. I got more important stuff to deal with. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about multiverses. So I'm just still working on the first one, the one that I'm living in right now. I'm stuck with that one. Once I get that one figured out, then I'll move on to another universe. But
Yeah, we got enough problems in this one, right?
yeah, I got enough problems right here. So.
And it was just about that. You have a universe. There's like a telos of some sort, but the universe it is a conscious subject. Some people would want to say, well, it may be experiential. Maybe there's some kind of like really rudimentary intelligence to it. Maybe it doesn't seem like maybe that big of a jump? Do you think it maybe organized itself in some sort of really abstract way, maybe? I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think so. I mean, that's what I've argued with in my book, right? The logos is kind of a disembodied intelligence or something, a kind of sense of order, or this unrealized or unmanifested order, which is kind of arguably maybe at the root of intelligence anyway, I guess, arguably. So yeah, to me that sort of makes sense. As a strong panpsychist, I would say yes, there's sort of a cosmic mind, and it's not really thinking things. It's not consciously driving things. It's not like some God character. But I think it's reasonable to say, well, look, the universe seems to be evolving from a very diffuse and amorphous state to a order of very localized, very high complexity. And it seems to be because the universe is expanding. The expansion seems to be driven by this thing called dark energy, which we barely understand. But there seems to be a force out there that's causing accelerating expansion. The accelerating expansion is driving this growth, this endless growth from the beginning of the Big Bang to ever increasing, ever dense forms of matter and energy complexity. And that brought forth, subatomic particles, and then complex molecules, and then life, and then complex life, and then simple tools and complex tools, and microcomputers and internets and systems and so forth. So it's marching along on this process, and that's a very teleological process. That the teleology is not because God's up there thinking, what can I invent next? It's just that the universe is marching on this process towards order. It's biased towards order and complexity, and it's driving, systems to ever higher orders of complexity. I mean, it's a lot of interesting questions about, why is that? Don't really know. That's just sort of, how the universe seems to function. Where is that going? We don't know that because we don't know how long. Is it kind of an infinite process? Is it going to keep going? It seems to be detrimental to humans and the rest of life on Earth, at least the process that's continuing on now with advanced technology, advanced technological systems, which seem to be sort of layering on top of us. In a sense, they're becoming more powerful, they're higher up on the complexity pyramid than we are. And if they're not already, they're rapidly getting there. And that's spells bad news for everybody downstream below us on the ladder of complexity, because we're in the process of being passed up by our technological systems, because that's the tendency of the universe towards creating these systems. I think if we understood that, we would probably take action and slow that process down, which we can still do. We cannot maybe defeat it, maybe not in the long run, but in the short run, we can certainly derail that process and buy ourselves a whole bunch of time, maybe to think about it, maybe to put in safe measures, or just extend our existence for a few thousand years. Maybe that's worth it in the long run. I mean, there's reasons to think we're going to lose out in the end. But the end, losing out in the end could be 10,000, 100,000 years from now. I guess if I'm going to lose, I'd rather lose, 100,000 years from now than 10 years from now. So that's, to me, that's the philosophical, metaphysical argument for taking action against technology, because it's extremely dangerous. It's an autonomous system which is running away with the planet, and it's threatening, to eliminate us completely and potentially the rest of life on Earth. There's evolutionary reasons for that, but I mean, we don't have to help that along. We don't have to make that happen sooner. We can make that happen a lot later than it's going to otherwise. So that's really where I've kind of pressed my normative case against technology. And that's kind of why I've sided with Kaczynski and others, because I basically think he's right. I mean, we need to sort of undermine the system. We need to stop it and derail it. There's good philosophical reasons for that, which Ted didn't know or care about, but to me, those are important, because that really sort of explains why you're in this situation, what you're facing, what you're up against, and then that helps you respond appropriately. So that's really kind of maybe one of my underlying motives. I mean, it goes even within the Israeli-Palestinian problem and in technology. It's like you need to know what you're up against. So study the opponent, study the enemy so that you know what you're up against, understand what's going on, and then you can formulate an appropriate response. And that's true in the realm of politics, and it's true in technology as well.
That's indeed wise. And yes, I'm with you in resisting the establishment for sure. So, Kyle, did you have any other follow-ups there on
It
that?
was just dialing it back, just that first point we talked about, because I will get a few more questions. So you have the universe. It is a cosmic subject with a telos, but it's not thinking like we are, but it's like an alligator in the sense it's like instinctual. It's like an instinctual kind of conscious mind that's going towards something because it is what it is, sort of, you could say. I'm trying to make it easy for the other guys that
Well,
are going
yeah.
to
So
ask me,
what's
like,
I mean, right? So again, it's an old question. What is this cosmic mind doing? Right? It goes back to Aristotle. So Aristotle basically had the right view. He said, look, there's a kind of a mind at the center. Right? He talked about this wheel. He talked about the cosmos turning like a giant wheel, and kind of the cosmic mind is sort of at the center. And like, what's his mind doing? And he's thinking about thinking. Right? This famous line from Aristotle in Metaphysics. Right? He's a thinking about thinking about thinking kind of being, Um, so yeah, I mean, it's almost futile to try to describe what's going on in this sort of cosmic mind. Um, you really stretch things to put it in human terms. So that's really kind of avoiding it. I credit Aristotle for not really trying to put it in human terms. Um, but yeah, you talk about very fundamental things about sort of wanting or desiring. That seems to be sort of a core element of any mind. Is sort of this striving for something. If you go back to all the philosophers who talked about mind in history, they talked about striving or wanting or will as a kind of essential element of mind. So if there's a cosmic mind, I can see, yes, it's sort of striving for complexity. It says, look, I have all this energy and matter. I've got so much at my disposal. What can I do with it? Well, I want to make complex systems because that puts that matter and energy to use. I mean, if I have to put it in words, I mean, it's like silly words, but to me, that's kind of maybe the right way to think about it, right? It's a striving, a desiring for complexity, for order in a universe of superabundant matter and energy. So that's probably the best that we can say about that.
awesome, thank you.
All right. Well, how are we on time? Do you have to get going or anything like that, or do you have a few more minutes?
Uh, I would say probably should wrap it up here today if we
Okay,
could.
that's fine. Yeah, that's just fine. You know what? That's actually a good stopping point. So once again, hey, we really appreciate your time and sharing your thoughts. We really value what you have to say and all that. And yeah, I think like not just for philosophy of mind, but also for politics. We appreciate how much you have to offer. And I think panpsychists and non-panpsychists alike should really consider this. And so yeah, we just thank you for your time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for helping promote this stuff, right? I mean, I can't do it alone. I need guys like you to talk about it, and deal with people's questions, and help get the ideas about out there. So you guys are doing good work too.
Absolutely, you're welcome. It's our pleasure.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, take
Yep.
care, Dr. Skrbina.
All
Goodbye.
right. Thank you. Bye.